Welcome to what will be, for now, the last episode of Scout Around, the weekly podcast show in which I look back at the pre-selection season we have had, the shows of last weekend. Many internal selections and presentations of songs by artists we already knew were about to come, but we also had some national finals too. Shows were there left, with of course the main course in Sweden, the big final of Melodifestivalen, with Frans winning it all with his song If I Were Sorry. I'm going to talk about it with our reporter at the scene, which is Ellie Lindo. Ellie, the win of Frans was hardly a surprise anymore.
No, I think after he first performed in the semifinals, he saw quite a rise in his popularity throughout Sweden. So I don't really think it was much of a surprise.
Do you think he will do well in Stockholm, in his home nation as well?
I think that's hard to say because obviously he has a lot of support in Sweden, but of course Swedes can't vote for their own country. And from what I saw, the international reaction was very mixed. I saw some people saying that the song was quite boring, that there should have been more of a performance. And of course there were a lot of comparisons to last year's winner, Måns, who of course combined a lot of different elements in order to win the competition. And you didn't really see as much of that with Frans. So I think it might be difficult for him to win over the rest of Europe.
Yeah, also because the field in Melodifestival and in the result, it was more close than it was in some other recent years.
Yes, it was quite close. I think he barely beat out Oscar Zia's Human, which I think had a little bit more of the elements that people usually look for in Melodifestival and in Eurovision in total. A bit more of the air of the dramatic was in Oscar's song. And I think we saw how close it was after the jury votes started coming in, because Oscar Zia was actually leading with the jury votes before the public votes were added. And but Frans also got a lot of support from the jury votes. I think he won 4 of the 12 points from the 11 juries.
Is this also a clue that he might not win Eurovision? Because when we look back at Lorraine and Manselmelo, they had a landslide victory in Melodifestival, and this was not a narrow escape, but it was tight.
I think that's a fair criticism of Frans. I think it is an indicator that he will have a tough road ahead of him. He may also have to consider adding a little bit more in terms of stage performance. Because I think historically with Eurovision, just standing in the middle of a stage with just, a few lights behind you doesn't really win over the European audience. So I think he has a little bit of work to do and some thinking to do as well.
What he does have is when you compare to other winners as well, the unique English accent Lena also used for her performance.
That will certainly that does work for him. That will certainly help him going forward. But I'm really not sure that's going to be enough, really, because I think something to also consider with Frans in Sweden is that he sort of has a bit of nostalgia, because he was already known to the Swedish audience for his very popular song "Who the Man" about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He performed that when he was 7, so people remembered him, as this really cute, adorable boy singing this song about Zlatan, and that really helped him a lot, I think.
What was the show like? Were there some changes in the Melodifestivalen final, or was it kind of the same as it was in recent years? Because we have seen the Swedish broadcaster always being innovative when it comes to lifting Melodifestivalen to another level.
Yes, I think that's something SVT does very well year to year. And this year, I think we saw more attention paid to the stage, for instance. There was a lot more in terms of things artists could do with animation and stage setup, which I found to be very interesting and probably something the rest of Europe could benefit from going forward.
Was it a good rehearsal for the big contest coming up in a couple of weeks?
I think it was. I quite enjoyed it. I myself was at a viewing party here in southern Sweden with some friends and fellow Eurovision fans, and It was really fun to hear their responses to it. We also had one or two people that had actually never seen a Eurovision national final before, so their responses to it were very positive, and they're still talking about it on Monday. I've had messages from people saying, "Yeah, I can't wait to see what the actual Eurovision final is going to be like." So I think it accomplished its job of getting people ready for the final.
The other final of last weekend was held in Lithuania, where after 10 weeks of shows, the favorite from the start won it all. Donny Montel makes the Baku reunion complete with Calliope and Greta Salom, as he will return to the contest with his song I've Been Waiting for This Night. And with that last national final, we know all the songs that will compete in Stockholm, except for the one from Malta. Ira Losko will not sing Chameleon in Stockholm, but use another song, and also the Bulgarian entry. We'll have to wait another week for that. But it's time to look at the first early favorites. Which nations will most likely fight for the title in Sweden? I will talk about it with professional gambler Daniel Gold, who predicted the last two winners correct in our talk show, the ESC Daily Show, in Copenhagen and in Vienna. Daniel, who are, in your opinion, those early favorites?
I would say that the two market leaders, Russia and Sweden, are two of the more likelier winners, and they would head my list too, as well as bookmakers' lists.
Okay, let's start with those two countries. What makes them so special? To start it off with Russia.
Okay, I should start by saying it's a very open year, and there are arguments against all of the countries, and so perhaps it's a case that there are fewer arguments against these top two countries. Russia have a very classic Eurovision sound. They have a strong voting bloc behind them and a very big name. Those are the three main advantages it has.
And what about Sweden?
Sweden has a little bit of the X factor this year, something very current, very credible, and something that's going to appeal to a certain demographic, i.e. teenage girls and their mothers.
As you said, there's not a clear favorite, not something that stands out like Euphoria in recent years or only Teardrops already at this stage. But we also have seen in the last couple of years that the winner is always the straight winner throughout the entire continent. Or are we in for a big and exciting close call?
You could argue that the Swedish song is going to do very well in Western Europe, and the Russian song is going to do very well in Eastern Europe. And we're less sure as to how each song will do in the other side of the continent. So that's why it is an open year, and we could find something coming from the pack and surprising in rehearsals, much like happened in 2014 with Austria and Netherlands.
And which country could be such a surprise this year?
It's hard to tell. I'm going to give two songs. I think the Latvian song is going to be very popular with juries, and if it's presented in a certain way, I think it can catch on with televoters as well. So that's one song I would suggest, and that's in the top 6 or 7 in the betting. And when I look to the longer odds, I actually give the same answer I gave 2 years ago at this stage. And I think actually the Netherlands is a quality song from a young guy who is actually a young superstar, a really charismatic, excellent singer. And I think the Netherlands will surprise people in rehearsals and in the final on May the 14th.
On social media, we also see many people who think France or Germany could be contenders, which would be nice if we have a Big Five country doing well, of course. Do you think that's going to happen or not?
I can't see a Big Five country challenging for the win. Of those two you mentioned, I think Germany have a very solid song, and I think that's more likely for top 10. France have got a nice song. It's the kind of song that passes people by, and I can't really see it making a dent on the scoreboard in May. I'm surprised it's as high up in the betting as it is, to be honest.
Is the total field, is it difficult for a gambler like you to do well in this year's Eurovision because it's such an even field?
It makes things more interesting and challenging. It means you have to think far more carefully. I go over the songs lots of times, listening to them, thinking about the people performing them. So it's more challenging, yes. But that's just something I have to deal with and still try and make some money.
So thank you, Daniel, and thank you for listening the last couple of weeks to our podcast show Scout Around. It was a pleasure to do this for you. And of course, we will get back to you with other episodes of our podcast, the ESC Monthly Show, and other shows in which we look forward to the Eurovision Song Contest in Stockholm, which is getting nearer and nearer.